Good morning, everyone. My name is Agniezska Machnicka, and I would like to welcome you very warmly to this webinar on climate change adaptation talk with our guest speaker, Mr. Abel Malschaert. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before presenting our distinguished speaker, I would like first to give the floor to Professor Barbara Warwas, the chair of Multilevel Regulation.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka, for this introduction or kicking off. I will just say a few words because I wouldn't like to keep us away from the interesting part of the discussion today or of the event. First of all, welcome to our speaker. Thank you very much for joining us today. And as Agnieszka already mentioned, it's really very important for us to understand the policy perspective on climate adaptation. Just a few words of introduction. This event is organized within the framework of the research group Electorate on Multi-Level Regulation. And maybe just to also position this discussion a little bit within our research. In our research group, we study regulation of different societal and professional challenges from different perspectives. We studied at different levels of regulation, and we also are very much interested in different perspectives of stakeholders regulating those challenges. And definitely our main goal is to make regulation or multi-level regulation more inclusive and also responsive to societal needs and including those societal solutions too. Climate change adaptation is certainly such a topic and such an important societal problem which requires collaborative solutions. We also had a research on heat waves with Gemeente Den Haag, which may be also quite interesting for you, Abel. And we really were looking forward to find solutions for local communities and citizens in different neighborhoods in The Hague. So I also hope that today we can learn a little bit more on those societal solutions from the perspective of local communities and Gemeente as such. So I look forward to this presentation and thank you very much again for accepting to speak to us today. So Abel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Before maybe Abel starts, I would like to tell a few words about him, if that is fine.
Sure.
Unless you would like to say this about yourself, but I think maybe, well, I would present the speaker. So, well, it is my great pleasure to present to you our guest speaker, Mr. Abel Malschaert. He works for SWECO, which is architecture and engineering company. And his company delegates him to advise and to manage projects at different municipalities. And currently, he's engaged with projects at our municipality in The Hague, Gemeente Den Haag. And his role is to improve climate adaptation strategies with partners in the city in relation to architectural designs and developments. And today, Abel will share with us his experience with climate-friendly projects in the city of The Hague. Thank you very much, Abel, for accepting the invitation and joining us at THUAS. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yeah, so as mentioned, I work for SWECO, an architectural and engineering company. As of May of this year, I'm in my role. I help the municipality of The Hague with stimulating and facilitating other non-governmental parties in the city to take up climate adaptation solutions. In the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'd like to talk to you about the next topics. What is climate adaptation? Well, might be an open door for some of you, for others maybe not so clear. What are the current policies in place? And what are designing principles and examples I can show you from the city of The Hague. And through this points, I'll elaborate a bit more on my role. And after that, I understand there will be room for a discussion and some questions. But if you have questions in between, don't hesitate to interrupt me. So with that being said, well, first one small disclaimer from my side. I don't have a background in sustainability or climate adaptation. I have a background in urban planning and geography, and it's from a personal interest and yeah, strong conviction that this is a field that we need to really work on, that I recently switched from as a project manager in yeah, housing and area developments to a project manager in the field of climate adaptation. So that being as a bit of a background, that I'll do my best to answer all of your questions, but be aware that this is not my field of expertise. So but I think in the last year I learned a lot on it, so I hope I'll be able to answer all of your questions. So to start, I hope this is something I don't need to elaborate too much on. It's we live in a time where the climate around us is changing. Currently, there are a lot of world leaders and other smart people in Egypt talking about how to mitigate the problem. But I read the other day that even if we stop all our emissions today, we still move towards almost 1.5 rise in temperature, degrees rise in temperature. So this is something that's reality, and we only have a short window of time to secure a livable future, as the latest IPCC report stated. Some of the implications that the IPCC report mentions, and I focus a little bit on the urban implications because that's my field of work, is that we will see an increasing amount of rain and also heavy or peak showers will increase. We saw it already last summer in the southern province of Limburg, and what that can result to. So these heavy showers can increases the chance of flooding, but also they expect to see a big rise in annual mortality in Northern Europe due to heat waves. If they calculated that especially within cities, due to the heat island effect of a city, a city warms up more than a forest. I'll talk a little bit more on that later. That with a 3 degrees rise in temperature, we'll see 100,000 deaths in Northern Europe. And but besides deaths, there are of course a lot of other health implications as well. Maybe some of you have experienced this over the last summer on hot nights, that it's hard to sleep, you're less focused the next day, you're irritated. These are very small things, but it has a huge impact on the society as a whole. And last but certainly not least, we'll see an increased risk of water shortage in the Western world. Again, last summer, it is something we had a long period with almost no rain and high temperatures resulting in drought. Well, I guess that's all quite clear. And as I said, even if we stop our emissions today, we'll still have to deal with a changing climate. So adaptation is inevitable. And with adaptation, what we mean by that is the process of reducing the vulnerability of societies for climate change. So what are the policies currently in place? Well, basically there is one overall policy, and that's the Deltaplan Ruimtelijke Adaptatie. The goal of the plan is to make the Netherlands climate-proof and water robust in 2050. And it's up to different levels of government, the local municipalities, the regional water authorities. In Dutch, it's waterschappen, but I couldn't find a better translation. the provinces and the national state work together in regional working coalitions to work on 7 different ambitions. And those are, first of all, to map or locate vulnerabilities. What are the places and spaces in terms of heat stress, waterlogging, droughts, which are really vulnerable and where we need to focus our limited resources on, because unfortunately, the field of climate adaptation, though it becomes more prominent on the political agenda, if you compare it to other fields of sustainability, for example, the energy transition, it is really not as prominent on the radar yet. And with that also the means, the finance, the money that's involved in this subject is not nearly enough to tackle all of the problems. So what we do now in these regional working coalitions is to map the situations where it's most urgent and where to start. And then the next step, second ambition, is to make a strategy for those locations. Third step, to make an implication agenda. How are we going to put that strategy into practice? Fourthly, is to utilize on chances and opportunities that already occur, meekoppelkansen in Dutch. And what we mean by that is, of course, as a municipality, we are responsible for the public space. And especially in The Hague, and I think this isn't done everywhere at the same level, but in The Hague, we really try to, whenever we have to do, for example, maintenance on a sewer system nowadays, make sure that we put back a sewer system that is climate adaptive, that contributes to the climate robust environment of the city. So maybe that can mean put a second sewer system next to the existing one so that we can separate drinking water from rainwater, or a sewer system that allows water to infiltrate into the soil, stuff like that. But if it also it doesn't just limit itself to sewer systems. It's basically everything we do in the public space. We try to make it sure what we put back is climate robust. And honestly, I have to say, this is a fight we internally have still, because it often costs a bit more money. And as I said, it's not a topic that's as prominent on the agenda as other topics. So while the team I work in, and I forgot to mention that in the beginning, I work in the department within the municipality of urban planning, and my team is the team of sustainable living environment. And we really try within this big organization, take everyone with us, make everyone convinced that we can't miss a single opportunity. Because, for example, with the example I gave of a sewer system, if we don't do it now, the next time we're going to look at this, it's going to be 20, 30 years later. So this is the moment we need to act and put back climate adaptive solutions. Fifthly, stimulating and facilitating other non-governmental parties. So this is where I come in. This is where my main job is focused on. Because to truly create a climate adaptive and robust society, we are highly dependent on other parties. Even if we take out all public space, there's 60% of the service in the city that's not in our domain. So to really create a climate robust, climate proof city, we're dependent on all other parties to also take action. Sixthly, whatever we come up with in those strategies and implementation agendas, we try to put into policies. And then seventhly, the seventh ambition is to act whenever an incident occurs. We have to have a strategy in place whenever a huge shower or longer period of drought or a flooding occurs. What do we do? So climate adaptation in the city, well, I touched upon the four main ones already. Means we have to adapt for more showers and more intense showers, longer periods without rain and high temperatures resulting in droughts, more heat waves and the urban heat island effect. And depending on where you are, and in The Hague, that comes mostly from the sea, the chances of flooding. So how do we prepare the city for this? We try to make we use this image because it becomes really easy to understand, I hope. We try to make the city as a sponge, and what that means is to collect and retain rainwater, whereas historically the Netherlands is really good at getting water out as quickly as we can. We have to start seeing rainwater as a viable resource, because we can use this water during periods of drought, and also we can use this water to cool down the cities during hot periods. And how do we do that? Well, very quickly to go over some of the designing principles for peak showers. What we do in the first place is try to retain the water and where possible, let it infiltrate into the soil. Store it wherever we can. That might be on roofs if constructions of buildings are strong enough to carry it, or underground, and reuse it during periods of drought. And otherwise let it slowly drain into the sewer. And I mean, we say slowly because we see with the big showers getting more intense that streets are often more flooded. So whenever we are able to retain and store water, for example, on a roof, only let it go into the sewer when the sewer is a bit more empty again and has space for this additional rainwater. The designing principles for drought are roughly the same. We make sure that rainwater is wherever it can infiltrate into the soil. We store and collect it to reuse at later points. But also we try to, with the designing the green, try to make sure we choose plants and trees that are able to withstand a longer period without rain, but at the same time won't drown when the roots are under water for a couple of hours. On the right side, by the way, you see more practical solutions, what that is. I'm not sure if you can read it, but also due to the time, I won't go into that for now. But if you have questions about it, of course, just ask me. Then designing principles for heat stress. Well, as I mentioned, water we can use to cool down the city because plants and trees vaporize the water they have in the system, but also by building fountains, and this cools down the area, surrounding area. More importantly, though, we have to make sure that in the city we have enough places that offer shadow. There is currently a study going on with what kind of trees offer the biggest decrease in heat. But in general, we know that standing in direct sunlight on a hot summer day compared to being in the shade can differ up to 10 degrees. So we have to make sure that when we design public spaces, there's enough spots you can sit where there's shadow. And thirdly, we have to make sure that we avoid warmth or heat accumulation by choosing the right materials that don't absorb the heat that they then will give out later during the night, but by choosing materials that reflect the heat and have low absorption, do a little on absorption. I'm not sure if any of you have ever, after a hot summer day, stand next to a brick wall that's been in the sun for most of the day at night, but it's like putting your hand against a radiator. It will just radiate heat. But if you would feel a wall at the same spot that's made from timber, for example, that's way less. So by choosing the right materials, both in color and texture, we can really bring down the accumulation of heat during the night. Yeah, then as you've seen, for all of them, it's green has a big part to play. So what in battling these effects of climate change in the city. So what we really try to do is make urban designers and landscape architects think differently on how they start on drawing designing their neighborhoods and their cities. Where nowadays it's still common to have a blank sheet of paper and put in everything a city needs, from streets, infrastructure, buildings, and then when there is some space left, they'll see if they can put in some green. We really try to change this around and make them start with you start with green, put in the most vital infrastructure, and then keep as much green in as possible. So what do we do where? As I said, there's only limited resources available, and this is basically the first of the ambition of the 7 I mentioned before. We try to locate where it's the necessity of us intervening is highest. What you see here is a screenshot from the Klimaatatlas Den Haag. This is all publicly available. You can look this up yourself if you find it interesting. And you can see for the different subjects what it looks like. But this is the screenshot from the city of The Hague, or at least part of it, and the heat map. And what you can see, we can take out of this is where the heat island effect becomes biggest. So this gives us information on where to focus on. We're also still learning ourselves on how this works, because this is just new information for us as well. Where I said before, we try to make green everywhere, let water infiltrate. We're now noticing that due to the surface water, that's sometimes really high, especially in the Netherlands, of course, where a big part of the western part of the country is underneath sea level. The surface level doesn't even allow us to let water infiltrate into the soil. So just to give you an example, that sometimes it sounds all quite easy, but the deeper you go into it, the more you notice that we're still learning on this subject, and there's not one overall solution. You have to really look at a certain location and see what possible solutions might work there. Due to the time, I think I'll skip this slide, but I want to quickly elaborate on this one. It's my last 2 slides before we can go into a little discussion, because I found this really interesting. This is an article from last week, the 1st of November, 10 days ago. And they looked into how people in the Netherlands appreciate green in their living area. And the good news is almost everyone does appreciate green in the living area, but not for the same reasons. We as policymakers or people working in the field of urban planning, we have different reasons why to appreciate this green so much. So climate adaptation and sustainability apparently is for a lot of people the least the last reason to want green in their area, which was a conclusion that was surprising to me, but good to know, because it means that it helps us think about how we can communicate about solutions we we put into practice, not to maybe communicate it as a climate adaptation solution, but for something else. And the good thing is, of course, that green is part of a solution for multiple policies and urban problems. So the first three you see here, we already touched upon in terms of climate adaptation, but green also adds to a healthy environment. It does so by improving air quality. It damps the sounds of the city. But green also is good for the biodiversity. It has a social impact because green in a city can really work as a social fabric. We see more and more people coming together around community gardens, for example, or seeing each other in parks. So green also has a big social function in a city. And the last one is the verblijfskwaliteit. I translated it to accommodation quality. And by that I mean it can also add to how people appreciate their surroundings. We know that people psychologically enjoy being in a green area, but we know now that it reduces heat stress. So for example, if you have a shopping street that's really with a lot of concrete and a second shopping street that has a nice green facades and it's a hot day, you might choose to go to the second one because it's nicer to be in. So it also in that way has it adds for people personally the verblijfskwaliteit, how they the quality of being there, and by that also has an economic impact maybe. My last slide is an example. We have the Kromvliet Park in The Hague. It's in Laak. I'm not sure if any one of you have been here, know this one, but it's a park in Laak which we are really proud of. It seems like maybe just an ordinary neat park, but from all of the roofs, from the surrounding buildings, from the surfaces in the street, all the rainwater is collected, and instead of being brought to the sewer, we bring it into an urban water buffer that can hold up to 100,000 liters of water, and it's located underneath the football cage you see on the left. The water from there is filtered by a biofilter with plants, and when it's purified, we store it in a deeper layer in the underground where we can pump it up to use to keep the plants in the park healthy during periods of drought. And there's also what you see here on as the top of the park. There's a communal garden where people build have their herbs and whatever growing. So it also has a big social function, this park, in an area that's normally has a lot of social issues. So the park also brings people together. So this is one example in The Hague we're really proud of, and I can highly recommend going there once. There are information signs. There are actually cows and pigs walking around. It's like really a city of the future, but I can highly recommend you have a look there yourself. I think due to the time, I'll leave it for now. This was my presentation. I hope I've been able to give you a quick insight in the last 20 minutes, half hour, of the policies we have in The Hague, how we try to deal with the climate adaptation issues we have in front of us, I think nice to hear some questions if they are there, or maybe remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abel, for this very, very interesting, very insightful presentation with so many things that are around us that we might not have been even aware of. So thank you so much. It's super fascinating. I'm sure that we have lots of questions to you, so I would like now to open the discussion and invite our guests to ask you some questions. Please, are there any questions from our public?
I'll start with one.
Okay, Paul. Yes.
Please. So first of all, thanks very much for the presentation. Very interesting. And this may be tricky, especially as you mentioned you only came into the field a year ago and you're really focusing on this part of it. But one thing you said, which framed your presentation, was whilst there's a focus in The Hague, and I'm sure this is reflected everywhere on urban climate adaptation, it's not the main focus. The focus is on energy transition or whatever. Do you get, and of course, part of your job is to move that up the priority list. Do you get a sense of the balance there? Are the priorities kind of shifting, or is it kind of energy transition and everyone else is scrabbling for the rest, or is actually poverty and economy the main focus, and this is something which they have to do because we have to push the right direction? Do you get any sense of that kind of priority?
Yeah, very good question, Paul. Thank you. It's we of course just have a new local government body installed, and in the college accord, I can't find the English word right now. I'm not a native speaker, as you might have heard by now, but it's so how the new local government is going to rule the city for the next 4 years. We do see very nice words on paper about these kind of subjects, sustainability, climate adaptation, but there's not a lot of money being freed up for the subjects. And there is roughly a bit more than 4 million euros for the whole. And then within the city government, we're trying to divide it as fairly as possible. But to give you a sense of how the balance is, indeed, it's energy transition first in terms of sustainability. It's only me and 2 other people working on climate adaptation, where it's 40 people working on the energy transition. And I mean, it's just to give you an idea of how these balances are. It's yeah, the focus is definitely not on climate adaptation yet, because luckily what I do find is people are getting more and more aware this is not a hobby. It's not something we have to do by choice. This is coming for us. What I tried to make clear in the first minutes of my presentation, it's and that this is becoming more and more clear. And luckily we have a wethouder, someone who really stands for it and really wants to bring us to the next level. So we have a bit more political, how do you say, backing up, political, yeah, to lean on, but it's definitely not on top of the priority list yet.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your question. Is there anyone else who would like to ask something? Abel?
Yeah, I would.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abel, for your presentation. I was, as I am more in the field of communication around all these topics, I found it super interesting that you said, you know, that in communicating this need for the transition, you need to take into account that this might not be the priority for many people when creating these green spaces. And I was wondering if you had already thought about ways to communicate this in a different way than presenting it as climate adaptation, and if that was successful or not.
Yeah, so we are thinking about this now, and it depends on where we want to implement certain climate adaptation solutions, what our target audience is. But what we notice is, for example, we want to create also a healthy city. So this is an angle we really try to grasp as a because we can put a lot underneath this umbrella. Let's say it's also about focusing on slower traffic, less cars in the city. So we and making streets focused on cycling and walking, slow traffic instead of the car. And this combines really well with green. So this will help us in a climate adaptation sense, but it also in all kinds of ways contributes to a more healthy city. So this is one of the angles we're really focusing towards. And maybe to elaborate a little bit more, because it's something on the that people don't really resonate with the climate adaptation story yet. We're currently doing, we have a participation process going on where on the 10th most prominent locations in terms of heat stress and water problems, we're going onto the streets, trying to start up the conversation with people living there, asking them if they actually experienced this, because we work based on models, but how is the experience of people themselves, and how quickly a summer like we just had fades to the background, because we're during the months of October and November in this process. And when I talk to people who they on how they experienced the hot summer we just had, it's like, oh yeah, I think it was hot, wasn't really that much of an issue for me. So it's a subject that really quickly fades to the background as well. And that again, well, it's good for us to realize that this is something people have maybe don't see the problem of really yet.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very interested in this. I'm also like doing a project right now on the impact of citizen science on environmental studies and things like this. So I don't know, I feel like if you ever want to talk about it, that's not inappropriate to tell you now, but like I would love to I don't know, join a conversation about this also.
Yeah, that sounds nice. Joya, I'm not sure if I pronounced your name right, but it's maybe Agniezska can or Barbara can link us later on.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I can be a point of reference to putting you into contact with each other. Absolutely. Are there any other questions? If not, maybe I would like to also ask something, if possible, to Abel.
Sure.
It's very fascinating to see this actually the practical side of how those adaptation strategies are being adapted in the city where we actually live, or which we know, and we don't really realize about this. But I'm actually interested about the other side of this. So some climate scholars say that certain legal frameworks that we introduce about climate protection do not actually have altruistic basis. So we as humans are not very altruistic creatures. And the reason why we want to safeguard the environment and our climate is actually protection of ourselves and our surroundings. This is reflected in some legal frameworks like the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. And obviously, when we can see this, these adaptation initiatives are also very strongly focused on ourselves, right? To provide us with the city, which is really nice in those different difficult times. And my question is, how is what is the approach of the stakeholders who receive your advice? Because maybe sometimes they are private corporations and private companies that are actually engaged into those projects. How willing they are to implement the changes that you suggest to them?
Yeah. Thank you. A good question. Well, it differs, of course, how willing stakeholders are. But normally, the stakeholders I'm in contact with are already thinking about doing something in terms of climate adaptation. And also, if I notice that they're not committed to the subject or they don't see the necessity yet, I won't put a lot more time or energy in it, because luckily there are a lot of stakeholders that do want to do something in terms of climate adaptation. So I try to focus on those. It's often the bigger private stakeholders, like big real estate companies as well, that they see they have a certain responsibility towards society to act on this subject. It's also, of course, like and I'm really happy about it, and I don't want to debunk their intentions, but also, of course, it is nowadays really hot to promote yourself as a green or sustainable company. So they are very aware of this, but I'm as well. So, for example, around the Grote Marktstraat, the big shopping street in The Hague, I try to create a public-private collaboration with the big real estate parties there, that if we all put green roofs on our buildings, or City Hall as well, we have to do this. We can make an impact together. I now have 5 companies that are on board, and I approach other companies by saying, you can't really miss out on this, because look what we're doing. We're trying to make like a green landscape up on the roofs in The Hague. And in these kind of days, they see the responsibility and the necessity that they have to do something on this subject as well. So it's by also making a collaboration, you create the idea for other companies that they have to also step in. On the other hand, unfortunately, of course, it all comes down on money in the end, and they, even if they're willing, they often look at how we can help them financially by realizing green roofs or water retaining roofs, for example. But yeah, in short, it differs, but luckily more and more companies see they have a certain responsibility towards this subject.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We have a question from Sylvia.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm sorry I'm not putting on my camera. I literally just landed at Schiphol back from COP27 in Egypt, so I didn't sleep all night, and or hardly. And but I presented our research on heat waves there, and I wanted to maybe come back to the. I must have maybe missed a few sentences that you said because I was picking up my luggage, but about the private sector, because I was wondering to what extent they can also be involved in cooling centers, you know, like in actually providing spaces, or like, you know, the cinemas that could have maybe reduced ticket prices for, especially for elderly to come, or the programming, or there could be shop owners and you know, commercial malls that maybe have a program also for the elderly. So it's not just the churches and the you know, libraries that are right now in the heat plan. So I was just wondering if the municipality had thought about it. In the meantime, I know probably it's not your area because you're in urban planning, but I just, and then maybe just from what you said now, so that's one question. The other one is just what you said now about the roofs, and actually I think there's some research, I think by the Hogeschool van Amsterdam, that actually the sun rating itself has more of an impact than the green roof. So I think what we advocate in the report is to give more subsidies, not just for roofs, but also for sunscreens, you know, and especially in social housing, and because elderly people, they don't really want to, well, they don't feel like investing so much in well, it's partly they're not allowed to, so it's partly, and so we found some frugal innovations that they can also put up, but still, you know, if they're allowed to put sunscreens, or why is there no subsidies for these even more effective actually protections? And yeah, because people don't want to invest necessarily themselves. And yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
so that's the question now. Those are the two things I can think of right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. So yeah, as for your first question on cool places, and I interpret your question as creating cool places, not just outside, but also inside buildings. And this is something we definitely, communicate on, and also how we approach the subject. That we want to create, like we're looking at if anyone living in The Hague from every front door, basically, you have to be able to reach a cool place within 200 meters walking. But with that, we also take into account, for example, supermarkets, which are often, well, you might remember from last summer going to a supermarket and you almost want to put on a sweater because it's so well air conditioned. When looking into how do we create a city where everyone can reach a cool place within 200-meter walking distance, we definitely also look at inside places. So this is indeed the approach. As for the green roofs, yeah, I'm aware. In terms of heat stress, definitely, if you're talking about high buildings, it barely has any effect, a green roof. So a green roof is more in terms of retaining water, also depending on the type of green roof, of course. But and when we talk about heat stress, it doesn't do a lot. So that's also why in my presentation I talked about creating shadow in the city, but also a high building also gives shadow on the street. So it doesn't need to be green. And for the social housing issue, this is definitely a big one. Also in The Hague, we have a lot of social housing, a lot of corporations, and we're actively talking with the big corporations in the city on how to make a livable inside climate, how they can what we as a municipality can do, for maybe, for example, put up big trees in front of the houses that aren't themselves well equipped to that aren't well isolated to keep out the heat, and otherwise what they can do by indeed installing sunscreens. So we're very aware of how especially older buildings are not built for the changing climate and the heat in the summer.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, no, it's very helpful answers. I mean, I just think on the first one, it's also about elderly people who are not, they don't think of walking to a park or maybe in a supermarket, or like, they have to maybe also need help to go to be picked up, sort of, to go places. But yeah, I mean, I know maybe this sounds a little bit exaggerated but still, I think, what we've seen in America last summer was people really at these big centers, that they put up the cooling centers. People were actually sleeping there as well. Like, it's really, like, I'm not saying, but still, it could be reality here as well, that people have to be evacuated, actively and brought to places. So I think we need to make provisions for that. Well, anyway, anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. And also, Rosa, you have a question.
Yes, thanks so much for the presentation. It was really, really nice to see that you're so busy with this, and that in The Hague so many people are working on climate adaptation. I just put in the chat as well. We are organizing an event with the European Impact Hub with lots of students about the European climate policy. We are inviting Frans Timmermans. We hope he will come over. We're doing this with Huis van Europa, and we have already 8 different educational programs that are collaborating with us on this, and it's especially about EU climate policy and youth, how the climate policy is affecting youth. So it will be organized by us, but also by students who will do workshops on SDGs. So it's not only about Fit for 55 package, but we will have a big discussion with hopefully Timmermans and also Rob Jetten is invited, and some people from the Hague University, but also Delft University. And so we have big collaboration, and I wanted to mention this, and I hope you, as the Hague, will come as well. The date is not ready yet because we need to invite Timmermans, and we have 4 dates in April that we are targeting. But please be informed about this. I'll look you up on LinkedIn and I'll inform you and invite you to be there as well.
Sounds great. Thank you, Rosa.
Thank you, Rosa.
Nice initiative.
Are there any other questions for our speaker? We have very, very few time left. Deborah?
Hello, good morning. Thanks so much for this amazing presentation and the talks around climate. We have heard a lot about the big plans from the municipality and for example, for the Grote Markt and the businesses that are there. But how do you look at it from the perspective of the smaller players, for example, in The Hague? I also live in The Hague in one of the neighborhoods. And I know, for example, that it's not very well known, but there are subsidies like Fonds 1813 or something like that, or other municipality subsidies that do provide money for projects if you promote or if you have a good idea for the street, for example, or for multiple houses. And my question would be, what is the role that you can play, or it's a University of Applied Sciences, so if we want to put it into practice from the citizens' side, in trying to push implementations like this, is this a role that you can play, or could you point us in the right direction to try to help us as citizens to actually put it into practice?
Good question. Of course, we're not just focusing on big firms, big institutes. We are, as a municipality, also have responsibility towards the inhabitants. I would say, especially in the first place, towards the inhabitants. And like you said, there are subsidies in place from both the province, but also the Waterschap, the regional water authority. From the municipality, currently we only have a subsidy in place for a green roof, but we're currently working, and hopefully this will be done in the first quarter of next year, to change this subsidy, which is now only looking and providing to help people taking action up on the roof by making it a green roof, but making it a more broad subsidy for all climate adaptation solutions. So also, for example, will help you if needed with putting more green in your backyard, and take out the hardened surface, the pavement. So have like a wide range of climate adaptation solutions where we want to help with, but at the same time focus it more geographically, because we only have limited resources, we have only limited financial means. Focus this subsidy on the places that need it most. And this is something we're looking into, also if it legally holds to build up a subsidy that way. If we can't help financially, it's in my role. It's actually I'm there at the municipality to help people, maybe on different levels. Maybe I can help you find the right parties or people that can help you make your plan get more realistic. And at the same time, I'm the only one at the municipality doing this, so I also have to within a 40-hour work week do as much as I can. But if you have a concrete question, you can always approach me, and I try to actively myself try to be there at participation evenings, like gatherings, so people are able to find me.
That's great. I'm sure we will make use of that. Yeah, I liked just one last comment that Sylvia brought up, the sun screens and things like that. As you might see from my name, I'm Italian, and I'm surprised that here in the Netherlands, I mean, green is great, but we are not looking at what do Southern European countries do to protect from the heat with sunscreens or shutters and stuff like that. And when I took it up to the gemeentes, to the municipality, actually I'm hearing a lot of resistance in terms of cultural background. Like, oh, we don't like shutters in our streets, so we won't go for it. But I think it's especially for the elderly people and something like that, it would be great to have these kind of things subsidized, because it's having quite a big impact. If I look at my background from Spain and Italy, it's what people do to keep their homes cool, and they don't even have air conditioning. So thank you.
Yeah, good one. Yeah, it's I think we can learn a lot from southern countries and how they deal with hot summers, and yeah, I feel like also it's better within the municipality. We have people that really like to protect how the city looks. For example, it's like old buildings, you hardly can change anything. Even double glass sometimes for monumental buildings is something they don't allow us to change. And yeah, it's you understand, you want to preserve an old historic city, but at the same time, if it becomes uninhabitable, what's you know, where do you focus? Where's the focus? Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah, for this intercultural perspective on climate adaptation. Super fascinating and super practical at the same time. Well, I'm afraid our time is up. This 1 hour passed so quickly. I'm sure that we could spend more time with Abel and ask him lots of questions, and he would have fascinating answers to us. But we have to close for now. So first of all, I would like to thank our distinguished speaker, Abel. Thank you for being with us. It was super fascinating for us, and very, very, very important also for us to learn about everything that you do on a daily basis, your work, your help to the society. So many thanks for this. And many thanks for our guests also for your questions, for making the discussion very lively and fruitful. And if you would like any contact in between you, so Abel and people from the university, I'm very happy to share this as long as Abel agrees for giving his contact details. And many thanks for this session.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Good conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I close the session, and I wish you all a very, very nice day and a very lovely weekend ahead.